be cold in Ukraine. So I ask all of you, if you are part of a government or an administration, part of a energy company, to look through your storage facilities if you can give more. On the ground, this is happening, and I think there's a lot of experience now from the first careful touches. Now there is a system established. We have just, in Germany, we had the need for bringing old coal power plants into the system after Putin cut off the gas from Russia. Now we don't need them anymore. They are demolished in a way. Ukrainians are here, Ukrainian engineers are here as we speak, traveling through these coal power plants and picking out all the parts they need for the reparation of their system. And this was not done because the minister, has asked RWE, because they had relations themselves to the Ukrainian government, to the Ukrainian energy companies. So this is happening everywhere. Christian Bruch, who I have to thank, the head of the Business Advisory Council we established, he's coming from Siemens Energy. So his job is actually to give advice to the policymakers, to us, to the Ukrainian government, how you can develop a market or circumstances for a market that the recovery from Ukraine is developing well. But what he's doing is actually bringing all his knowledge as the CEO of Siemens Energy into the reparation, the restoration, the stabilization of the energy system. And I think this is what this conference should be mainly about. What can we do more? Who has something to give that can be given, and the risk for a cold winter in your country, in your municipality, is not so high. We have learned on the hard way, we the Germans, that energy can be used as a weapon. I touched this issue when I was mentioning that we put all these coal power plants into the energy system after the loss of half of our energy that was coming from Russia: coal, oil, and mainly pipeline-bound natural gas via Nord Stream 1. But how much energy can be used as a weapon we see on the ground in Ukraine? And Putin is not an idiot. He knows exactly what he's doing by destroying the energy system. He is trying to weaken the morality of the people of Ukraine. If we believe, and this is something I deeply believe, that Ukraine's fight is not only a fight for the territorial integrity of the country, which is a cause in itself, but it's a fight for freedom, also for freedom and peace and freedom in Europe, then we can't let Putin weaken the morality of Ukraine's people, and therefore we have an own interest, an interest in ourselves, that you have a warm house in the next winter, at least some sort of warm housing, as the situation is really, really difficult and dangerous. Last remark, the best way to secure the energy system is not to repair the energy system, but to protect it. So, of course, this is related to air defense. And as I mentioned 2 months ago, something like 2 months ago, when we met in Ukraine, you told me about the last attack on the power plant of Kharkiv, I think it was, or in the region of Kharkiv, when you said the Russians fired 11 missiles on the power plant. We saw them on the radar. We had an IRIS-T system. The IRIS-T system had 7 shots left. All 7 shots hit the targets, the missiles were destroyed, but then it was empty. And we saw them coming, and we could have destroyed them, but we had no ammunition left. So now the talk is about energy and how to help Ukraine stabilizing and repairing the energy system. I beg you all to do what you can, but we should not forget that this is not only a recovery conference, but also a conference on defense. And I hope that all the governments and all the leaders will also supply Ukraine with the air defense that is needed to protect the country. Thank you very much. Very warm welcome to Berlin, and a warm winter for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Habeck, for your support and support of the German government and German companies that you're providing. We cannot appreciate it enough. in Ukraine. But going forward, I think I will welcome on stage Mr. German Galushenko, Minister of Energy of Ukraine. And I ask German to share what challenges Ukraine is facing, how the government is going to address them, and where help is needed. Minister of Energy of Ukraine.
Thank you. Dear friends and dear Robert, we had a lot of discussions and during this time of full-scale invasion, and really the importance of this discussion is to get the right outcome of them. And what you mentioned now, that is really what is very important to understand. So now in our fight for freedom, in our fight for democracy, it's very important that we have our battlefield. And the name of this energy battlefield, the energy front, as we call it, it's like the second line, because the first line is, of course, our army. And in this battlefield, we are now facing the same situation as our army facing on the front line. So if you help us with Iris-T, Leopards, with Gepards, that is what our army needs immediately to protect our country. The same story now, unfortunately, is in the energy sector. So gas turbines, gas pistons, high voltage auto transformers, all kinds of equipment which we could get, that is our weapon to win the war. That is a very important point I want to mention. When there were some discussions when you have to invest in Ukraine, so now or just after the war, war insurance, that's very, very important points. I understand because it's the issue of business. But you should understand one thing. As you support us with the tanks, air defense system, ammunition, to be near us until the victory, the same way you should support us with the energy equipment to win this energy war together with us, not to leave us alone. And that is a very important point. So I really now, you heard the figures President mentioned today, it's really 9 gigawatt which we lost in the generation, with the peak consumption 18 during the winter. And of course, now I must say more focused on the immediate solutions. So we understand that we need to survive the next winter. And everything what we can do together to increase the decentralized generation, to protect the energy which is attacked again and again and again, they are not stopping. So even the units which we started again, they attack them again. That is very important to win this war together. And I know that a lot of countries really support it, and you did a lot of in the energy sector. So we have supply of equipment in kind. We have donations from the country to the Energy Support Fund of Ukraine, and it is almost 500 million euros now in this fund, which were used to buy the necessary things. But let me be frank with you. In the today's situation, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need solidarity to win our battle. The Russians won't stop if they could achieve the blackout of Ukraine. Never stopped. So Robert mentioned that they use energy as a weapon. But in Ukraine, we see some other story. They use weapon against the energy. And these losses is really, really unprecedented losses in any energy system. And what is very important that we still maintain the system. The system is still operational under attacks to the energy infrastructure, which they started in 2022, by the way. The scale of these attacks increased this year and increased dramatically. But it's very important to make the right decision and quick decision. And if you ask me what you would prefer, like long-term projects, which could add, I don't know, 9 gigawatt back in 5 years, or very quick projects, which could add 1 gigawatt this year, or let's say 3 gigawatts next year. So I would say immediate decisions. Because for us, you should hear me, for us, that is a matter of survival for our people. So it depends how much Ukrainians would not suffer from these terrorist attacks to our energy infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I'm welcoming on stage representatives of our panel. Natalia Boyko, advisor to Prime Minister of Ukraine. Volodymyr Kudrytsky, chairman of the board of Ukrenergo. Alexei Chernyshov, chairman of the management board of Naftogaz. Knut Riesel, managing director, Notus Energy GmbH. And last but not least, Cheryl Hanway, director for energy, infrastructure, and mining in Europe and Latin America from IFC. So to kick off the panel, I'll address Natalia first, because you work as advisor to the Prime Minister. You have a high-level helicopter view on the energy sector, not only from the energy sector itself, but also from all other areas that the government is dealing with. Natalia, how does the government plan to support the investments in the energy sector of Ukraine during the wartime? How is that being addressed by the government on an urgent basis? Yeah?
Thank you. First of all, I really like to thank our partners for incredible support, and in such a moments we probably have a clear feeling about how important it is that Ukraine is still presented on a high levels discussion, and we still keeping the focus in the world to the crucial need to support Ukraine. We have now a very challenging period because actually the government needs to cover all the necessary tasks at the same time. In one hand, we are working as an anti-crisis machine. So we are now challenging how to get more aid defense, protect with the different types of protection of our key energy objects, repair what should be repaired in the very short terms, but at the same time to shape up investors and to get more money from the IFIs, private business, and also the different type of funds to Ukraine. It's very hard, and it's always complicated how to make the very different tasks at the same time. So the prioritization from our side is more or less logically. So as I mentioned, and as a minister mentioned, air defense, protection, and then to use money in the more effective way as possible. We're trying to repair what can be repaired, to use decommissioned equipment for the objects that are under attacks. At the same time, we are trying to get money from the different type of sources to the energy sphere. When we're talking about the energy companies, of course, we are working with IFIs very active, and my deepest appreciation to our partners. For example, we don't have here presented all of them, but I appreciate very much, especially cooperation in energy sphere from the EBRD and European Investment Bank, because it's just the incredible support with a very quick decision-making process, and we are doing great projects year by year, even now in a full-scale aggression. When we're talking about the private business, I think the problem number one is to unblock the war insurance. I spoke with a different type of businesses, and I understand that decision to enter Ukraine is very complicated because the risks are very high. When you're in Kyiv, you're drinking coffee, you're trying to feel how the city lives, it looks that it's very logically to start work in Ukraine, but then you analyze the general situation from outside. Without war insurance, I'm not sure we will somehow get new investors to Ukraine.
But Natalia, I think recently we know that DFC is providing war risk insurance. There was the MIGA, but it's a facility. But also Ukraine has established its own insurance agency that's providing the coverage.
But I still don't have a pilots in energy sphere. I need to have them.
Yeah.
I personally am ready to support every project to connect with MIGA or DFC or with the Ukrainian fund, but I need a champion.
Understood.
So quick as I will get a champion, we will succeed with that first pilot as a sign, as a hope, as a great step that we need to unlock. So war insurance. The second is, of course, the regulation. We try to deregulate now the connection to the both grids, electricity and gas, to deregulate environmental measures, also the measures about the city building normatives. But at the same time, I understand that it's probably a bit late, but it's always better later, but
any little help helps.
Yes, but good. So I hope that step will be also very important to shape up a bit our companies and to push them in the right direction.
For sure.
And the last one is, of course, money. So, of course, we are working with the state-owned banks with nice programs that they can propose to the private investors, but also, and a very important instrument is a Ukraine facility, as we mentioned today. And here, I also would like to highlight that actually, for example, now with the state-owned companies, we are working with the IFIs with a very short period, but it's liquidity or equipment. And when we're talking about the real projects, I understand that the timeline of implementation is still long. So my personal goal will be, if we will succeed together with the IFIs partners and the private business and state-owned, with that timeline of initiation and implementation of the projects, because 4 years for Ukraine facility is a very short period, and energy needs money and projects right now, today, yesterday, and always.
Brilliant. And I think a number of IFIs present in the room are announcing a few new projects that they're undertaking with the private sector. There was an announcement from EBRD and Goldbeck, others as well. So I think out of this conference we'll have a number of new private projects.
So the special task for us is also to prioritize a bit balancing capacities, because I appreciate very much each megawatt that will be built in Ukraine, but still, crucially, we need now balancing capacities to have a more stable system in the current period.
And on the balancing capacity, I want to turn to Volodymyr. Volodymyr, you are running a state-owned high-voltage transmission company. These days, what are your challenges and what are the solutions that you may be coming up to help the markets to operate properly? And also, I know your assets had been targeted a lot in the previous years, and also the plans to secure them, plans to increase the capacity for import, etc. What Ukrenergo is doing for the future?
Well, Ukrenergo is doing two things. We operate transportation network, transmission network for electricity, and we dispatch the whole system, the power system. So we operate both our asset base, but also the power system as such. Indeed, we have lost almost half of our transmission capacity in the course of campaign of 2022-2023 that adversary has undertaken against Ukrainian power system, but we managed to mobilize unprecedented financial support from donors, and we searched for auto transformers in more than 30 countries. We screened more than 400 companies producing, manufacturing high voltage equipment, auto transformers and other equipment as well, and we managed to restore the grid to the level that is almost 100% correspondent to what we had before the start of this huge campaign. Now we need to increase the level of difficulty and to repeat the same exercise with the generation. We have only one major problem, and this problem is not in the transmission side currently, it's in the dispatching room when we see this deficit of generation all the time. At this very moment, our national control room has introduced rolling power cuts across Ukraine because of deficit of power in the country. And we need a lot of generation. So first we need to restore what was lost. The president today told us about 9 gigawatts of generation which was damaged or destroyed. That's a huge number, almost a half of our generation base as of last winter. And of course, restoration of these damaged assets is priority number one, because it takes $30,000 to $40,000 to restore 1 megawatt of damaged capacity, and it takes up to $1 million to build a new capacity. So in terms of resources allocation, it's a no-brainer for us. Of course, we need air defense, because air defense will define what type of power cuts we will have next winter, whether this could be mild and temporary, or it could be much more critical for population and for businesses. And if we do not receive enough air defense, we will not be able to protect what we restore, and therefore the winter will be very harsh. But I would like to stress and put more focus on emergency midterm solutions, which is building up new generation facilities. The point is that with every new attack, we are losing forever or for a very long time 1 or 2 units, or even more sometimes, of generation. So our asset base our production base is degrading with time, and we really need to roll out very quickly new generation facilities in Ukraine, comprising renewable technologies that would make the system cheaper, like wind and solar, but we also need, as Natalia mentioned, balancing capacities to be able to absorb these renewable sources into the system. We're talking about gas, flexible gas generation, and biomass installations, and of course battery storage systems. And what we are doing now, together with the energy regulator, we are creating economic conditions for these projects to be more profitable than in Europe, so that the capital flow would be directed from Europe to Ukraine and not vice versa. And I need to say that even currently, you would get better reward for your investment in Ukraine than you would get in many European countries. But the problem is that these investments, they need liquidity. Nobody does energy investments using only equity. We need loans, we need project financing for that, and we need obviously some sort of war insurance or risk insurance for these type of projects. I see in this room people from private business who I know are developing their projects right now. But we need to scale them up. We need to do not 1 gigawatt of new generation capacities, which we have in the pipeline currently. We need to do 4 to 5, maybe 6 gigawatt of overall different types of capacity, and maybe even more. So what we need now, we need a very concrete, clear instrument how to make sure that liquidity which Ukrainian commercial banks have, which IFIs have, can reach investors from Ukraine and abroad that are willing already to build these new generation facilities. We need hundreds of small power plants nicely dispersed across the country. So the most strategic, most critical task, how to allow these companies to reach liquidity reserves that are there at IFI's treasuries, but also at commercial banks of Ukraine.
Thank you, Vladimir. And many of those power plants that you mentioned will be running on gas because it's required for quick startup and balancing capacity. Alexei, your company is the largest oil and gas producer group in Ukraine. How is Naftogaz addressing the energy security challenges in view of the war, constant missile attacks? I know that even your objects, not only in power generation, but also Naftogaz objects are under attacks as well. How do you address it?
Thank you very much for your question. I understand it's the end of the day, the first day of the conference, and some people are tired already, and we should give straight answers to the straight questions.
Exactly.
And the question here is very simple, as I understand it, is whether Ukrainians will have enough of electricity next coming winter. After we realized we have lost 9 gigawatts, which is 50% of everything. And I think the equation and the answer is quite straight. We will definitely have a certain lack of electricity by the start of next winter. And the equation consists of 3 parameters. Parameter number 1, our capability to renew big stations that were damaged. Number 2, our capability to bring cogeneration gas to power equipment in such a short period of time. And number 3, our capability, joint capability, to bring more air defense. And all this balanced will bring us to a warm winter that we all dream of. From another hand, we should understand that this equation will not work in full. So definitely we will have certain shortages, and we should be prepared for that. That means Ukrainian people and Ukrainian economy should start considering more efficient behavior in terms of consuming energy, and we should do it immediately. To be honest, we are facing heating season almost in 5 minutes. This is something just more than 100 days for the winter to come. It's just impossible to get another 9 gigawatts. And we all understand it. I'm sure Ukraine, with its heroic behavior, will be capable to renovate a part of it. And I'm sure this winter will be fully satisfied with the appropriate volume of electricity needed to go through. Of course, it will not be the same like we used to have. But we should be more responsible in energy consumption. And I think we should work with people, we should work with companies and institutions to be more adult and to behave more responsibly. And our responsible consumption of energy would lead us to a better and more energy independent state. Talking about gas and natural gas, Naftogaz's answer to this challenge was very simple and very straight. We decided to produce more gas.
Easy.
As soon as we understood gas is the weapon, and this weapon protects Ukraine. Since last year, Ukraine is energy independent in terms of natural gas. So we produce as much gas as we consume, meaning we do not import. We do not take natural gas from European consumers, and we don't spend currency, and we use it for another needs. And I think this is our answer. And we might need more gas to actually be used for additional electricity generation, and we are prepared for that. But let us take a look in the future. If this winter is done, we still have to get more generation.
Yeah.
And in this regard, you know, we all speak, and we're using the word market. We want business to work in the market. Let business produce more energy. But let's be honest. To do that, first we should liberalize the market.
Correct.
The market is regulated. Do you know any product or service right now in the war-torn Ukraine which is in deficit and which is not regulated? There are many products and services in Ukraine, And where it's market, it exists on the market, and it's fine. So what we should do in the next years, and I'm not sure the war is justification not to do it in a certain way, is to liberalize the market of energy once it's possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this would lead private companies and private business to invest into energy generation. And I'm sure private business will do it in the best fashion as soon as state-owned enterprise, with all respect to Volodymyr and myself, they are efficient during this time. But we need private business to prosper in Ukraine, and it would, of course, help ourselves to be more self-sufficient in energy. And in terms of gas, I think we've done a lot, and we continue doing that further on. Thank you.
Alexei. That's a very good recipes, because I think a good example was that even when Russians bombed all of our oil storage facilities, the oil traders and the petrol traders were able to reconfigure the logistics and basically, 80% of the petrol and diesel was coming from Russia or Belarus before the war. In a matter of a couple of months, the business was able to change the logistics and completely satisfy the internal demand with the imported petrol now coming from Europe. So that was a good example.
Yeah, just a short remark, and because this is a real market, not regulated.
Exactly.
So we used to have different logistic chains of oil products coming to Ukraine. We are import dependent on that, but the market immediately adapted to it. Exactly. We don't have an access to the sea in full right now. We have very expensive routes of bringing oil products via trucks and railway, with all the logistic issues that we have. But there are oil products on the market, and no one is speaking about that. So we should think about that, and this is a good example. Thank you.
Perfect. And Knut, you represent a company which is a renewable energy developer and operator. These days, even during the war, a couple of companies in Ukraine commissioned new renewable energy facilities. Speak of Elementum Energy or DTEC. They were commissioning wind farms. There was a joke in the Financial Times. I think it was like that. Guys, Ukraine this year commissioned more wind farms than the UK in total during the war. So how do you think there is place to do it in Ukraine these days? How do you do it? What are your plans?
Absolutely. Studies state that Ukraine has a potential for 850 gigawatts of renewable energy. I like that study, but that's long term. To my knowledge, in the last 2 years, 620 megawatts of renewable energy was implemented in Ukraine. That's a lot. That's little compared to what is added in Germany or in US or in China. Here we're talking double-digit or triple-digit gigawatts, but we need to look at quick fix, short-term and medium and long-term solutions for Ukraine. Notus Energy is in this project development business for more than 20 years. We have experienced many ups and downs. We have, for example, developed a 100 megawatts wind park in Kosovo on 2,000 plus meters altitude, topology challenges, and surviving 5 governments in Kosovo, so we are in for the long term. We don't want to survive Ukrainian government, we are in here for the long term. But since the full-scale invasion since February 2022. In early summer or spring, we continued our development in the Odessa Oblast area. And here we are in the process of developing 300 megawatts of wind park. And we are ready for 120 megawatts of wind park in this area. We've done all the permitting, all the land acquisition, and we have signed some MOUs here in this conference for equity structure, but we need to have the lenders, the banks support us, and the banking community needs to take merchant risks to support us, and that is very important.
So you're ready to go, basically.
We are ready to go also during martial law to go in and start developing those megawatts, those 120 megawatts. We are talking to the wind turbine manufacturers. Of course, you mentioned the logistic challenges.
And the lead time for them to produce the
exactly.
turbines.
But we are in close negotiations. But then just imagine it's not just delivering, but you need to have the promises for maintenance to keep those wind turbines running.
Exactly.
That's very important.
Thank you, Knut. And Cheryl, on that note as well, given that you represent one of the lenders, what role IFC is playing these days in helping Ukraine meet its immediate energy needs and also in financing the green transition? Because that's exactly what I think Knut needs. So how do you react to that?
No, definitely. I'll get to that part of the question in just a moment. IFC is the private sector side of the World Bank Group, and we are active in Ukraine. But given that we are part of the World Bank Group, and obviously the immediate crisis right now, as everyone has been saying, is how are we going to keep the lights on and the heat on? I know this is an energy panel, but the two kind of go in tandem. I wanted to share a little bit of what collectively as a World Bank Group we're doing to represent my colleagues at the World Bank and MIGA as well on this panel. So in terms of the World Bank, they are actively leaning into ongoing projects for emergency relief as well as restoration with the view to a handful of months at best to get things restored. They have a repower project where they're already supporting the provision of transformers, other important equipment. They're involved in works that are making the existing substations and transformers and others less vulnerable to attack. They've been taking grants that they have and mobilizing those for the restoration of heating systems. They're repurposing some of their existing loans to try to rebuild some of the hydro that can be repaired or put online, looking again at supporting some of the modular distributed type of generation that's needed in the very near term, even if temporary, but that is absolutely needed. And then also looking to support battery storage precisely because that is something that's needed to sort of deal with, stabilizing the grid and making the overall system more stable, recognizing that a lot of the flexible energy was what had been damaged. In terms of turning now to IFC on the private sector side, what are we doing? We've got a number of things that are underway right now in terms of immediate projects. But we're very cognizant that that isn't going to be ready and make a difference for the upcoming heating season and winter. But nonetheless, absolutely crucial not to be waiting at all at this point in time. Right. So we're already actively conducting due diligence on new wind power plants. Again, bringing in the distributed generation, being part of what the future of the Ukraine grid needs in terms of green energy. These are onshore wind projects, again, very well suited to what the energy system needs, both in terms of throughout the day matching the energy needs as well as throughout the seasons matching the demand.
And I think
these are projects that are a combination, these are projects that are a combination of taking market risk. We recognize that a number of reforms have been underway that are making the energy market, but nonetheless, it's important for lenders to take those risks. We also are engaged in a transaction that will be looking to do corporate power purchase agreements, recognizing that some of the larger industrial players across a number of segments equally need energy and are looking to secure that through corporate arrangements. So again, a bit of innovation in terms of types of offtake that can be well suited, and one of them will have co-located storage with it again, recognizing that batteries are crucial.
And on some of those, Cheryl, I understand you do club deals, right, with other lenders like EBRD, DFC, so this is also quite a new topic that a couple of banks can come together and do a project where they think that there's a need for risk sharing.
there is enough space out there for all of us. I mean, we're absolutely doing club deals and really hoping that we can do even more going forward. Again, storage is important, so we're not waiting. We're already actively in conversations with Ukrenergo as well as private sector players to see what can be part of bringing the storage on. And lastly, something that can maybe be done a bit quicker or can be done for power systems that are smaller than necessarily needing us to finance them directly. We're working on risk share agreements with some of the local financial institutions so that they can equally get some of the small distributed generation modular approaches to SMEs, to municipalities, to smaller corporates, and working indirectly through them. So that's sort of what we're doing immediately. We have things that we're doing that are mid-term and longer term as well, because we recognize, again, we can't wait to be thinking about bringing large-scale renewable energy online.
It takes time. It takes time to build a wind farm, so it's not that quick.
I think can I just one final remark? I think the most exciting thing we're doing, when it's still going to take a bit of time, but a joint World Bank group has created a program jointly with the government. Renew Ukraine is what we're penning it at this stage, but it's very much trying to bring some of the expertise that we've had in other markets to think about what would be needed to get frameworks in place that could be for large-scale renewable to be tendered with storage, but what risk mitigation instruments need to be there in terms of providing offtake and certainty of payment and a number of other aspects that we recognize are needed today to get other lenders besides ourselves, foreign investors in terms of developers to come in and not wait until we're in a full-fledged reconstruction phase. If we don't start already doing the prep work that will get some of these frameworks in place, it will take many years, and we don't want it to take years. So already thinking about what need to be scalable, contractual type of arrangements, backstopped by donors and others in the near term, but trying to see what frameworks can be put in place for that type of investment to come sooner rather than later.
Perfect. Thank you. Natalia, on that point as well, you mentioned you have some ideas as to how mission-driven finance and innovative financing solutions can help Ukraine to restore its energy infrastructure. So from the government side, what's your take on that?
Thank you. Thank you very much from that also portfolio of the World Bank. Now the next logical example from my side will be one of the most painful cases that we actually spent with the state-owned companies for the last 3 years about the portfolio that we're working with. One of the very great projects that was supported by the World Bank for the state-owned company Ukhrhydroenergo was about the batteries in sun. We was dreaming about that project. That was the pilot, and that was a real challenge to try to work with a bit old-fashioned state-owned company with such a dream project. And unfortunately, 2 years ago, we took a decision to refocus that financing from the dream project that we was looking for to the some called current needs. And we use that money source for the reparation of some damaged by Russians equipment. That illustration is one of the most painful scenarios that Ukrainian is going through. When we are cutting our dreams and plans, and we need to refocus that human source, financial source, time source to some called current needs. The state need, unfortunately, to take responsibility on that very painful package of damages. But at the same time, we're still trying to dream and to initiate these new projects. So I hope that we will find also the right space in a dialogue with other partners to build not these necessary projects for the first step, first 5 gigawatts, but also to initiate big projects that will make Ukrainian economy possible to grow. Not just to survive. And we will transfer from the energy mix of survivals to the energy mix of sustainable development. We actually still trying with the World Bank to find money from the different type of funds to that project. So if somebody is dreaming still about the battery storage project for Ukhrhydroenergo, please text me, I will be happy to support. So we need to use more effective the export credit financing. Now it's not so active used by the energy sphere. I hope that we will find the balance between the state responsibility and private ambitions using Ukraine facility with a more effective way. I hope that we will use the European Bank, the EBRD source to initiate new projects in this very tiny 4-year period with the best effectiveness. At the same time, as I already also mentioned, Ukrainian state-owned banks and Ukrainian bank sector is now trying to play much more effective role for these new projects. So here I understand that we also need to have a big support from IMF, from the IFC, and from all our partners that are working with the Ukrainian bank sector.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you. I wish that comes true as well, or the dream comes true. But Volodymyr, these days we are hearing a lot of questions about restoring confidence in the balancing market and payments on the renewables, on the renewable market. Are you working on anything that can hopefully can solve this problem once and for all, or at least restore the confidence of the investors in this regard? In a few words.
Yes. Actually, we did an exercise of restoration of the confidence several times over the last few years because of deficit of money to compensate to renewables since 2020, but we almost managed to get to zero debt in 2021. It was middle of February. We issued the biggest corporate bond in the history of the country, listed on the London Stock Exchange to pay out the debts to investors, but then war started and the debt was growing again. But now we cleaned few segments on the market. We have zero debt for ancillary services. These are system services that are paid for these, the power stations that are able to balance the system. We have zero debt for rooftop solar. We have zero debt to for curtailments of renewables. We have decreased the debts to industrial solar and wind parks from 32 to 24 billion hryvnias. And but these new projects in wind and solar, they operate on a free market. So what they need, they do not need new feed-in tariff scheme. They need just understandable price setting mechanism. Yep. The regulation of a wholesale market that just recently happened, and we see the price which indicates that Ukraine has a deficit. The price in Ukraine in a wholesale market has to be higher than in Slovakia or Hungary, because Slovakia or Hungary hadn't lost half of its generation capacity.
It has to send a signal. Yeah.
The price has to reflect the signal, and it does. Now, for ancillary services, for preparedness to balance the system, we pay 5 to 10 times more than most of European operators. Again, 5 to 10 times more. We pay 150,000 euros a year for 1 megawatt of installed capacity of this kind. And given the capex of 800,000 euros per 1 megawatt of gas peaker, you have a payback of 4 years roughly, maybe 5 years. So we reward this flexibility. And this year, I already announced this publicly, I would like to reiterate this again on this conference, that Ukrenergo is intending to decrease the debt on a balancing market to zero this year. So we are creating this economic framework, but we are still hearing this notion that even though the investors could bring to the bank the project with 4-year payback, the banks are not able to provide enough liquidity. We need to invest 5 to 7 billion euros into balancing generation in the next 2-3 years, and 5 to 6 billion into renewable generation in the next 2-3 years. There's no way we can mobilize that effort, that financial resource from public funds, from gifts. We need to rely on public sector in that. And the only real barrier is liquidity excess. We need 50 to 100 private companies to build balancing generation and the same amount of companies to build renewable generation. We need these companies to access the financing from the banks. And this, I think, should be the practical result of this conference, one of the most important practical results. Find an instrument to de-risk these investments for the banks. And maybe for the banks to decide to be a little bit less conservative on taking the risks. Because there's no way you can treat those projects as if Ukraine had no war. We need to build this generation. We need to start immediately, and I support fully the IFC's position. We have no time to wait. If we would like to survive the winter of 25 and 26, we need to start right now. It's emergency need.
Perfect. Thank you, Volodymyr. Thank you. Now, I don't want to keep everybody for long. We have really like 3 minutes for everything. Alexei, is Naftogaz going renewables, as all major oil and gas companies are, supposedly?
Once it's profitable, we do.
Okay.
If you explain me whether it's profitable or not.
I think we have a
I'll
number
give you a very short example of how business works now. I'm a true believer of the balanced things in the world that are balanced by supply and demand. And the state and the government should not, irritate with that. So let us do the following example. We have the biggest gas storages in Europe, in Ukraine, in a war-torn country. During the war, we decided to motivate European traders to store gas in Ukraine. During the war, gas, which is quite a flammable thing, theoretically, we have made a solution for European traders that brought 2.5 billion cubic meters of gas to store last year, value $1.5 billion. Why it happened? It's very easy, because our offer and the market situation was balanced with their risks. Business can accept risks, even war risks can be accepted by certain business if they see affordable and appropriate margin ahead. So this is a good example. The companies earned their margin, they earned their money. We have had $1.5 billion of asset in our storage, and we have earned on renting the storage. And it all happened during the full-scale war.
Yep.
Now we are under attack, and our storage is under attack. During last 8 weeks, we had 7 missile attacks on our gas storages. But believe it or not, we still receiving gas to our storage. Why? Because we have balanced our offer with the market conditions. If we would be capable enough to do the same in energy, in generation, would definitely be profitable. And we will do it. Tell me any single international company playing or being present on Ukrainian electrical generation market. Do you know one?
Not anymore.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but
we've been speaking about 3-digit numbers within one government. That are
Understood. Understood.
Just a brief remark.
Okay.
Actually, the supervisory board of Naftogaz at least decide that upstream increasing is the priority #1, at least for now.
Okay. Okay. Knut, maybe a couple of words as to what risks are you facing, and as Alexei mentioned, how can you de-risk them? What areas do you see that basically blocks the investment into Ukraine even more, from your perspective?
I'd like to give you an answer on the short term, and then give you an idea on thinking out of the box on the long term.
Can you give me a short answer?
Short answer is Yes, yes. We continued to keep our team in place in Kiev and in Odessa, and we added. And we continued with all the development work, as I said, but with the positive support and from lenders, and we are positive to start implementation. As we all know, next winter we're not able to implement 120 or 300 megawatts of wind farms, but we need to start.
Right.
And that we would like to do, to start now, to have the wind farms for
Ready.
next year.
Yep.
And beyond. On the long term, as you mentioned, the gas economy, Germany is a very gas-hungry country with its industrial base. But in the future, Germany is thinking to transform that gas economy into a hydrogen economy. Instead of importing hydrogen from the south of Europe or from the Middle East, you have the pipelines, you have the renewable energy potential, transform your economy into a hydrogen economy and use your infrastructure in the longer term. That will transform Ukraine enormously, and that's, I think that's your potential for the future.
Perfect.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Knut. And Cheryl, do you think that Ukraine could do more to encourage further private sector financing and support the restoration of its energy sector along with decarbonization and decentralization? Do you think we need to do something before you can do something?
In part. I do think that a few ingredients will be key to really getting the private sector involved in the recovery, and actually in connection with the private sector opportunity report that we had done at the World Bank Group jointly with the government, and looked at scenarios that involved reform and non-reform scenarios, it was clear that you could get almost a 16-time increase with reforms. So the government is already, and it's absolutely remarkable, the amount of reforms and EU accession work and everything that we've been hearing about that has been happening despite the active fighting. But I do think going even further in terms of some of the reforms to build upon the remit law and some of the wholesale energy market and others, the government's been doing a very good job recognizing sort of all of the cost affordability elements, but nonetheless doing tariff increases. Still some work needed to get closer to cost recovery tariffs, and I think those types of reforms, as well as clarity around how some of the arrears from the previous green tariff scheme for renewables that particularly for foreign investors still create a little bit of an overhang. So coming up with some sort of credible path forward in that will all go a long way to opening up new investment. I think in addition to that, we're going to need a lot of innovation, and that comes from some of what I was referring to before in terms of thinking about creative hybrid types of offtakes, taking the market risk, partnering it with corporate PPAs, thinking about what elements can put together sort of a credible, predictable enough scheme to bring in additional private investment at scale over time. And then finally, absolutely going to take more donor financing, multilateral participation, some of the schemes that were announced over the course of today with the EU and the EC and others. Everything that we've been doing to date has been generously backed with varying amounts of first loss guarantees or other risk mitigation. And I think as we get some of these innovative schemes going forward, at least in the near term, to create some of the predictability that I was relying on will still require some donor money, but we're confident that done properly, it can be done on a sliding scale, that it will fall away exactly as the reforms and the market conditions and the depth of the market so that they can very much take off together. So I'm optimistic. I think it's going to take all hands on deck clearly to survive the next few months and do what we can in terms of immediate emergency. But even, as I said previously, not waiting and already doing all of these, making active investments now, like the 350 megawatts of wind that we're actively working with private sector partners as well as other financiers to get debt and equity in place, while already starting to think about what's the next wave of really getting even larger scale investment coming in because it's critical.
Brilliant. That's all the good recipes, and I don't want to hold all the people here for much longer. But what I heard today is that various parties have different asks to each other. I think everybody is asking for air defense, so that's I think for Ukrainian government and German companies to work on together. Then I think from the IFIs and the players on the market, we have an ask to government and the regulator to have a clearer market and open market and functioning market. We need to have regulations, and I think that liberalize the behavior on the market. And I think Volodymyr mentioned that is coming. We'll see more market signals for balancing market, for auxiliary services market, if not already. We are going to clear the debt on the balancing market, so that's going to restore the confidence. And I think there's also the ask to also the regulator and about the offtake PPA and bankability of that PPA. And in general, there's also ask to the financiers about war insurance availability for the investors and also to make sure that the private projects get realized, to have this additional access and oomph to the liquidity that the developers can access. So without further ado, I thank you for your attention. I am asked to remind you that we'll have an evening reception with the none other but the German president, Mr. Steinmeier. So please, please stay and attend the reception. But other than that, you have been a fantastic audience, and I hope you learned something new. And we look forward to working with German companies, German government on successful projects in Ukraine. Thank you so much.